Hello, everyone. I'm here today with Jay Baer, and Jay has spent 23 years in digital marketing and customer experience, consulting for more than 700 companies during that period, including 32 of the Fortune 500. His current firm, Convince and Convert, provides digital marketing advice and online customer service advice and counsel to some of the world's most important brands like the United Nations, Allstate, Cisco, and Cabela's. His new book, Hug Your Haters, is the world's first modern customer service manual showing how companies large and small can benefit from the enormous increase in online complaints and customer feedback. His second book, Utility, Why Smart Marketing is About Help, Not Hype, was number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list and a runaway number 1 Amazon bestseller. Jay's Convince and Convert blog was named the world's number 1 content marketing blog by the Content Marketing Institute and is visited by more than 250,000 marketers each month. Jay also hosts and produces the Social Pros podcast, which is downloaded 65,000 times monthly and was named 2015's Best Marketing Podcast by Content Marketing Awards. And today we are going to talk about social customer service, why you need it, and how to do it right. Jay, how are you today?
I am fantastic, my friend. Thank you for having me on the show. Fired up to talk about this topic.
Absolutely. I assume you are, seeing that you wrote a book about it. And
exactly.
As I told you the other day, when I read it, I really had my reservations. Like, what am I really going to learn here? You know, and once I dug in and read it, I was like blown away and was like, okay, I know a list of people that I need to either give this book to or send a link to buy it. And you probably want me to send the link. But
whatever. I don't care. It doesn't matter. As long as people read it, it's fine. But I appreciate that very much. Those are kind words. But you're right. You know, I mean, I've written books about marketing and I've written a book about customer service. And it is harder to sell a book about customer service because everybody thinks they're good at customer service. Like nobody thinks they're bad at customer service, which is one of the great ironies of this book, because when you read this book, you'll realize that you're not nearly as good as you think, but it's kind of a chicken and the egg approach when you're trying to sell a book like that, right? It's really fascinating.
I can imagine it, and I will say the title you came up with couldn't have hurt. I mean, what a title, Hug Your Haters.
Thanks,
you know,
thanks. It's a better title than the actual meaning of that title, which is, you know, answer all your complaints. That's not a very good book title. So Hug Your Haters, much better.
Well, Hug Your Haters got the job done. Well, cool. Before we, dive into, all the best practices for, executing customer service correctly through social media, can you first just talk a bit about why this is currently important and growing in importance?
Well, look, for a really, really, really long time, businesses have had it pretty easy in the area of customer service because for really since the time of Pompeii, almost all of our customer interactions have taken place in private, face-to-face, and then eventually telephone, and then, well, I guess fax temporarily, and then email, right? So almost all the things that happened between businesses and their customers took place in private. Now, because of technology and consumer behavior trends, an increasing share of consumer interactions are taking place in public. Social media, ratings and reviews, websites, online forums and communities. And when customer service becomes public, customer service becomes a spectator sport, and that changes the revenue implications for customer service quite a bit. Because back in the day, if a company was not very good at customer service, well, so what? I mean, you're going to disappoint that customer, and that customer might talk negatively about that company, but how many people does that customer really know? Like, how many people do they really talk to? Like, maybe at their church or their job or whatever, but it's not going to be a huge impact on that business probably. Now, though, when tens or hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people can see how companies handle their customers online, it's a much bigger deal. So companies that are good at customer service benefit disproportionately today, and companies that are not good at customer service are penalized disproportionately today.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And what about, like, customer advocacy? Is it about the same when you answer customers via email or social? Has that changed at all?
I don't know how it's changed. The research that I did for the book, and this book is very much rooted in research, and that was intentional because, as I mentioned at the outset, it's already hard to tell people, hey, man, you think you're good at customer service, but you're not as good as you think you are. You should read this book to prove it. And then if that book is just, Jay says that you should do this thing, that's not really great either. And so this book is built around research. So it's not just me saying that this is a good idea. We surveyed thousands of Americans about the science of complaints to figure out exactly what's happening today and the trends that businesses need to know to get better at customer service, and that kind of gives this a little more heft than just, I think you should do it this way. But what we found, shockingly, well, let me tell you a different story, okay? I'll tell you a story. You mentioned the book title. So Hug Your Haters was not supposed to be the title of this book. The title of this book, it was supposed to be Under an Hour, because the original premise for this book was that speed is the most important thing, that companies that are faster are companies that succeed more, and that the most important thing now is to be fast. But I thought, well, if I'm going to write a book about that, I should know whether or not that's true. And so I did the research.
What a daunting task.
Crazy, right? Yeah, you would think all authors would do that, but alas, that's not the case. So I did the research and found that it isn't true. Speed is very important, as we talked about in the book, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing, by far, is just to answer. And so what we discovered is that the most important thing that a company can do is to answer all their customers. And that's why the book became Hug Your Haters, not Under an Hour, because the thesis now is you answer every complaint in every channel every time. In the research, we found that a third of all customer complaints are never answered, never.
Wow.
It's a huge problem, right? And no response is a response. No response is a response that says, we don't care about you enough to even acknowledge your dissatisfaction. And so we studied it exclusively, and to answer your original question, when you answer a customer's complaint, okay, now this doesn't mean you solve it, okay, this doesn't mean you fix the problem, it just means you answer it. It can increase their advocacy by as much as 30%.
Wow.
And that impact is greater online. Online social media, it's more like 50%. Why? Because people who complain in social don't anticipate that they're going to hear back, because so often they don't, right?
Gotcha.
So you're blowing people's minds because they don't always think that they're going to get an answer on Twitter or Facebook.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So basically, you're just exceeding, like more than exceeding expectations based on what people would think was going to happen, and for that, you get the extra bonus of the advocacy and getting those people to come around. Makes sense. And what about the financial impact? I saw you mention something in there, and I know people like Tony Shea at Zappos, they actually look at customer service as an extension of marketing in regards to their budget. So why would somebody like that think that way?
Well, let me just touch on expectations again real quick before I answer that question. To give you a comparison, if you answer a customer's complaint via phone, it increases their advocacy by like 10% or less. But if you answer a customer's complaint on Twitter, it increases their advocacy by like 40%, because they expect you to answer the phone. Right? You're not getting. It's like when you go in your office and you turn on the lights and the lights actually come on. You're not like, hell yeah, electric company, way to deliver. Right? It's just, you just expect that to happen. They don't get any credit for that. Like, you're not high-fiving when the, trash guy comes and picks up your trash either. It just is, right? So they don't have any expectation opportunity there. Right now, there's a colossal expectation opportunity for businesses who move to social media and use that as a way to delight their customers. But there's a huge revenue impact there. So this is one of the most powerful things I can tell you.
Well, I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Customers who have a problem, and that problem is successfully fixed by the business, buy more stuff than customers that never had a problem. So
that is
your best customers, your most valuable customers financially are the customers who had a problem that you fixed. I mentioned that in a presentation a few months ago. It's crazy. I mentioned that in a presentation a few months ago, and a guy comes up to me afterwards and says, Jay, love the keynote. I used to work for Whirlpool, the appliances company. That I used to work for Whirlpool. We had a division, a sales division of Whirlpool, and what would happen is when customers would call in with a problem, if we could fix the problem, we would then take that customer's name and put it on a list. And then this special sales division 2 weeks later would call that customer and try and sell them a different Whirlpool appliance. And guess what, Jay? It was the most profitable sales team in the company.
That's a real world example right there, you know. But once you're saying, and again, this is to, you know, what I was talking about, how I got so much more out of this book than I thought I was going to. It's like some of those things are just, they're, I guess once you know it to be a fact, they make complete sense, right? But it's just some of the most obvious things aren't obvious until they're stated, you know, as such. And that just makes complete sense now that you're saying it, I guess, you know, and there's research backing it up, but that's still a little surprising to hear.
We all know, everybody knows that it makes sense to retain the customers you've already earned, as opposed to constantly churning customers and having to replace them, right? Like, there's no debate to that. Nobody's going to say, like, no, retention isn't important, churn's good. Like, that's just, it is, right? It's just a fact. You learn that the first day in business, right? Everybody knows that. But we don't actually run companies that way. It's not how we actually spend our money. So some research that Adobe did before I should say after the book came out, so it's not in the book. Adobe did some research that found that in business to business, the average B2B company gets 40% of its revenue each year from current customers. Now, your results may vary, but on average, it's 40%. On average, the typical B2B company spends 2% of revenue on customer service.
Wow.
And that includes people, that includes software, that includes the whole deal, 2%. So you're investing 2 to maintain 40.
That ratio does not seem right.
It's crazy. So one of the things that I talk about a lot now is without great customer service, great marketing is a waste of time.
It's funny you say it. I say that all the time. It's like that's the one little thing that gets always missed in all these sales and marketing stuff that you learn about is, well, you got to have a good product. You got to have good service, and that just doesn't get talked about. So it's wonderful that, you know, a marketing guy has realized that and brought to light.
That's what I keep telling people. I'm like, you know what, people, they come to me all the time and say, Jay, all the things you talked about and hug your haters makes a lot of sense, but it's going to take a lot of work for us to be really good at customer service on Twitter and really good at customer service on Facebook and eventually really good at customer service on Instagram and Snapchat, and we got to pay attention to Yelp and TripAdvisor and all this other stuff. Like, that's going to take a lot of time. Jay, we don't have time to do that. And I say, that is total bullshit. You totally have time. What you should do is spend less money on marketing and spend more money on customer service, and I say that as a marketing consultant.
Right. Right. No, I know. I mean, what better validation do you get from a guy who's, you know, supposedly and potentially taking money out of his own pocket just to tell people the right way to spend their money, you know, and your clients are ones who will pay you big bucks, right? And you're telling them, hey,
there's no way to run a business, right? And that's what happens, right? We're doing all this marketing, we get customers, and the service sucks, and so they leave. And then we got to get more customers, and then they leave. We got to get more customers, and they leave. You never get ahead, man. It's one step forward, 2 steps back. And now that customer service is a spectator sport, you can actually make customer service, you know, your real competitive advantage. I talk about the story about Discover Card in the book. I think it's a really good example of this in practice. And so you may know, people may know that Discover Card invented cashback. So the whole idea of you get cash back on your purchases, they invented that whole concept like 25 years ago, something like that. It was their deal. That was their competitive advantage against Visa and MasterCard and American Express for a long, long time. And then 5 years ago or so, the guys at Capital One came on the scene, and they hired Jennifer Garner, and they hired Samuel L. Jackson, and they spent a ton of money on television ads to convince all of us that, no, man, Capital One are the guys who do cashback. And so 3 years ago, Discover Card had an emergency meeting with their executives and said, guys, we no longer have a reason to exist because the thing that made us special, nobody thinks about us for that anymore. Somebody came in our backyard and just drank our milkshake. So now what? What can we own? What can be our thing, right? Because frankly, credit card's a credit card's a credit card in large measure, so what can be our thing? And so somebody said, okay, well, what if we decided to be the best company, not just in cards, but in all of financial services at customer service? What would that require? What would we have to do to be so much better at customer service than anybody else in the industry that we could actually use it as our competitive weapon? And so they did a bunch of analysis and a bunch of research and hired a bunch of consultants, and they figured out that if they could answer every customer in every channel, every time, within 20 minutes, 24 hours a day, they would be so much better than anybody else that they could use it as the core of their marketing. And they said, let's do it. So they spent all kinds of money on software, re-engineered tons of internal processes, hired a ton of people. And now Discover answers every question in every channel, every time, within 20 minutes. Phone, email, Twitter, Facebook, skywriting, smoke signal, whatever, 20 minutes or less, that's their thing. And if you've seen any of their TV commercials in the last year, now all of their television commercials are all about we're better at customer service than anybody else. It saved their company because they said, look, customer service is marketing if we can do it better than everybody else in our industry.
Yeah, I mean, it makes so much sense. It really does. And I love hearing stories like that because what does that mean from me and you, right? The more and more people spend on this, it's just going to create a better experience for everybody, and once everybody catches on and you stop, some of that money shifting from convincing people to use your services to actually making the services bigger and better, it's just one of those neat things that you kind of go through life and it's like, oh, well, this is good for all of us, and more power to that company who's doing it. Yeah. So it's wonderful hearing stories like that, especially for a big company like that, and they're not the only one. I mean, obviously Zappos did this, companies like Southwest Airlines, and you're seeing more and more and more and more companies, getting involved in answering questions and doing stuff. So it's just going to make everybody's life better, and those are the kinds of things that's just it's a good win-win in life, and I love hearing it. And I've more than convinced me, and I'm sure all the listeners, that this is a way to go. So let's start at the top here. How would a company get going here? I mean, do you have any advice for like the first step in getting the customer service department or the company as a whole social in that regards? Do you have any pointers there?
Yeah. The first thing we always do is perform what we call an honesty audit. And so what we do is look at a cross-section of all of the customer interactions, phone, email, social, and beyond, to get a sense for what the real volume is, what kinds of questions customers are actually asking, and whether and when the business is actually responding, and if so, what are they saying? And we call it an honesty audit not because the business is lying to customers, but in many cases the business is lying to itself. A lot of times, the only people who really understand customer service in an organization are in customer service. And for most other parts of the industry or the business, they're like, yeah, the customer service guys, they're great. They got it handled, whatever. They really have no idea what's going on. If you say, okay, what's your ratio of emails to calls to social media, customer interactions, unless you're in customer service, they have no idea. And so what happens, a lot of stories and anecdotes get told around the business that convinces everybody that they're really good at this. Meanwhile, they may not be. And so the honesty audit takes a cross-section of all those different customer interactions. When you look at that, you can say, oh, actually, maybe we're understaffed here, we're overstaffed here, we're taking too long to answer here, we're not answering these particular types of questions with authenticity. It just gives you kind of a lay of the land. So that's the first thing we do is an honesty audit.
Oh, that's the very first thing. And what would be the next step to get them going?
Yes, the next step we would look at is to say, okay, now how can we improve the things that really need to be improved to essentially exceed customer expectations. That's what this is really all about, right? You want to exceed customer expectations with your service so much that it makes word of mouth involuntary. You want customers to say, I am compelled to tell somebody about what a great experience I had. That's the test. That's the test, right? Where customers become volunteer marketers and they say to their friends, you won't believe what happened to me when ... right? And the end of that sentence is, I contacted this business via Twitter, or I called them, or whatever, right? So you have to figure out what you can do to make that happen. And so sometimes you can lead with speed, and that's what Discover Card does, right? Response time is kind of their calling card. And so you figure out, all right, what do we have to do to get faster? Sometimes you can lead by channel breadth. So there's businesses that we work with who succeed and lead because you can contact them in every way, shape, or form, right? You can fax them, you can WhatsApp them, you can Facebook message them, you can get customer service on Snapchat. I mean, you can, however you want to contact them, they'll handle it. There's other businesses that lead with humanity, who train their customer service reps to answer most customer questions with videos, or to be very over the top empathetic, things like that, right? So you kind of map out the portions of the program that you can do so great that customers don't expect it, and then you sort of push those levers over time, because you can't do this instantaneously, and that's where you end up.
Gotcha. Awesome. Now, you
kind of touched... company, for bigger companies, it's a software play too. Like you know, there's definitely all right, especially in social, like what software are we using to manage the social? And then in bigger companies, it's how does the social media software integrate with the email software and/or the phone call center software? And so that gets a little, you know, can get a little confusing and complicated. But in certain cases, it's really important too.
Gotcha. So basically, do your audit, see where you have your rooms for improvement, and then, decide what you want to kill it at, and then execute and kill it, right? And then, it's obviously going to be...
There's all kinds of specific stuff, right? Like I talked about in the book.
Exactly.
Like reply only twice, right? You never respond to a customer more than twice in public because it's counterproductive and it's a waste of time. And so you also never channel shift on the first reply. So one of the things that a lot of companies are guilty of now that drives customers crazy is, let's say somebody complains on Facebook. Hey, you guys suck, whatever. The customer service person who handles Facebook will say, we're terribly sorry to hear that. Please call us at 888 whatever. We'd like to talk to you about it. Well, the customer in some cases like, man, I just finished calling you, and the reason I'm mad is that I didn't get the answer I wanted to get from the call center, or I had to wait on hold too long. So I went to Facebook as sort of the place of last resort, and what you're doing is telling me to go back to the place I just was. And so, you never want to channel shift in the first reply. You always want to say, thanks so much, how can we help you? Or if for some reason you don't want to do it publicly, which is pretty common in financial services and healthcare, you would say, hey, we're terribly sorry, please send us a private message with your account information and we'll look into it. And then after that, if you have to, for whatever reason, have them talk to somebody on the phone, then you can send them back to the phone. But you should never do that on the first reply because it makes people really mad sometimes.
Great pointer, and I felt my anxiety level going up actually when you were saying, I know that feeling. It's like, what? No, come on, I'm your customer, right? I know that. I mean, I really kind of felt my anxiety going up as you were saying that. So you kind of touched on this a bit, and I know you have different methodologies for dealing with each, but to talk about, the two types of haters, and then, in your opinion and your ingredients for, solving, each one respectively.
So what we found in the book, and we didn't know this to be true until we did the research, is that there really are two different types of complainers, different types of haters out there. There are off-stage haters, and I call them off-stage because they continue to complain in private. So they use phone and email primarily to complain. And then there are on-stage haters that complain in public. So that's social media, review sites, discussion boards, and forums, etc. And the people who complain off stage are a little older, a little less technology savvy, a little less social media savvy than the on-stage haters.
Take it easy, Jay. Take it easy.
Well,
I'm an off-stage hater.
Yeah, but you know what's interesting is it's not. Those differences aren't huge actually. It's not like your grandparents are off stage and millennials are on stage. You know, like that's true kinda, but it's not. It's not really like that. So what's interesting is that the big difference between the two is expectations. Right? We've talked about that a little bit. If you complain off stage, phone and email, you expect and anticipate to hear back from the business. 90% of the people who complain via phone or email expect the business to get back to them, 90%. Less than half of the people who complain in social expect to hear back from the business. So if you really need an answer, you're not just complaining, you're not just griping, you need an answer. In many cases, you will complain off stage. If you're just complaining about the business, not necessarily complaining, you know, to them, but you're just griping that these guys suck, in many cases, that's where you go on stage, Twitter, Facebook, Yelp, TripAdvisor, etc. And so the huge opportunity for businesses is to answer the on-stage people because, again, they don't expect it. And so if you're just like, you know what, I don't like these guys, whatever, on Twitter, then they just pop out of the woodwork and say, hey, I know you weren't tweeting at us, but we saw you mentioned us, and we're sorry you're unhappy. How can we help you? They're like, whoa. Game changer, right? They just didn't see that coming. So that's where you get that really significant advocacy and loyalty bump is when you answer people who aren't necessarily looking for an answer.
All right, and how do you you have some pretty cool acronyms that you mentioned for each one that kind of drive home your formula for dealing with each. Can you dig into those quickly here?
Yeah, it's actually one of the things I did in the book, which I think is interesting. I did it in the last book too. Is there's actually a quick reference guide at the back of the book, which takes all the kind of key points from each chapter and summarizes it so people can go back and refer to it after they read the book and without having to reread the whole book. It's pretty effective. So we think about off-stage haters, people who complain phone and email. The acronym that we use there is HOURS, H-O-U-R-S, and that stands for Be Human, which is particularly important on phone and email because a lot of times those interactions don't come off very human, right? How many times have you called a call center and it feels like the person on the other line is having like the worst day ever, and they may be, but it doesn't make the interaction with that person or that company feel very good, you know, and plus you also get, you know, phone trees and press 3 for this and 5 for that, or you get a lot of, you know, email autoresponders. It's just not very good. So be human is one point there. The other one is use one channel. We were talking about channel shifting a minute ago. Unify your data is the U in that acronym, which is where you get into the, hey, the email guys have one database and the social media guys have one database and the phone guys have one database, or how often does this happen? So you call, this happens a lot with airlines in particular, or credit card companies. You call up, right, and while you're waiting, they ask you to put in your account number.
Oh,
so you put in your account number on your phone, like boop, 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 and then you get a person who's like, hi, I'm Julie, what's your account number?
Yes.
You're like, Julie, I'm almost positive that 4 seconds ago I put in my account number, so how do you not have that, right? So that happens all the time, which is super annoying. Resolve the issue is one that's particularly important for offstage to actually solve the problem, because when you're in a social media environment, you can kind of go back and forth. You're not necessarily going to be able to solve everything in one tweet, but on the phone or via email, like don't kick the can down the curb and say, well, we'll call you back or whatever. Whatever you can do, solve it right then. It's much higher customer satisfaction that way. And then the last one is with speed. And so when we talk about speed, and I mentioned that the book was originally going to be only about speed, it's still super important. When we talk about speed, oftentimes you would think that I'm referencing social media. And, of course, speed is important in social media, but speed is just as, if not more important, off stage. So one of the things that we learned in the book and the research for the book, which is crazy, right, is that businesses take an average of 44 hours to reply to an email.
Wow.
That's a really long time, right? I mean, that's that's almost 2 days, and that is not going to work. The other stat I love from the book is that I believe it's 85%, I think that's the number, I think it's 85% of Americans say that they hate to wait on hold, which always makes me think, okay, who are the other 15%? Like, what's their deal? Like, they just love smooth jazz so much that they're willing to wait on hold. They want to wait on hold. They don't have Spotify, but they love smooth jazz. Yeah. So waiting on hold is about the worst thing you can make somebody do now because, you know, look, it's a different era now, right? If you waited on hold 15 minutes, say 3 years ago, you'd be like, that kind of sucked, but whatever. 15 minutes today feels like a really long time.
Yeah.
It's just our perception of time has changed a lot because of social media. And so we've got to have more people answering to get through the calls more quickly. So that's hours, H-O-U-R-S.
Okay. Now moving on to onstage.
So onstage haters, the acronym is FEARS, F-E-A-R-S, FEARS. And that stands for Find All Mentions. F is Find All Mentions. And what I mean by that is I mentioned earlier that where you can really blow people's mind is when you answer the folks who don't expect to get an answer from you. And the only way that can happen is if you find mentions of your business or your products or your people that aren't necessarily tagged or sent to you directly. So you've just got to look a little harder in social media and in discussion boards. Like, there's a lot of chatter about companies in discussion boards and forums that they never see because they never look for them. So you got to find all mentions. You got to look a little harder.
Can you give a pointer on that? Like, are there some good tools to use for that?
Well, certainly any sort of legitimate social media management software will be able to help you find more of those keyword-driven mentions about your business, especially on Twitter, Facebook, and places like that. We use Sprout Social in my company. There's tons of other good ones, Hootsuite, Spreadfast, there's lots and lots. Mention.net is one that's free for basic users, so there's lots of them out there. And then for discussion boards and forums, unfortunately, there really isn't a software package that finds all the discussion boards. Some of the more advanced social listening tools will for big companies like Sysomos or Sprinkler. You know, for small and medium-sized businesses, and certainly for individuals, the best approach is probably to just find the forums that matter in your industry and just go and look for your name once every couple of days, you know? Just say, okay, somebody take 10 minutes and do this on a regular basis is probably the fastest way to do it. Okay.
All right. I think you're on E.
E. So E is display empathy. And I've got some great examples in the book about sort of empathy and lack of empathy. You can't control whether customers complain. You can totally control what happens next.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a lot of oxygen on the high road. And a lot of times customers say things in a way that is not complimentary. And sometimes, especially online, more so than phone and email, I think, customers can get a little out of hand, right? And they're real snarky and real mean. And of course, the human reaction, the natural human reaction is to, you know, is to feel like you're being attacked, is to feel like somebody is calling your baby ugly, and to essentially fight fire with fire and say, okay, customer, if you're going to be negative, then we're going to be negative right back. And that is counterproductive, especially when you're dealing with a complaint that is in public, because then everybody can see that you took the bait and you got real angry as well. So you don't understand that person's story. That customer could be having the worst day of their lives, and you just got caught in the crossfire. So you can control how you handle every response. And so having empathy for the customer and being genuinely sorry is really important, and it's something we do a lot of training on.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, I think Bill Clinton did it best, right? Feel your pain. But it sounds kind of like a joke to say that, but if you want to take a step back, there's genius in that. And that's probably what got him elected, the way he was, he got millions and millions of people for him to express, empathy. And I've heard that, over the years many times, and it's like, it's funny to say it in his voice and make a joke about it, but it was real and it was powerful. And he was a master of influence, and that's what he did. Answers, you're an A, I believe.
Yeah, A is answer publicly, and we talked about this a little bit earlier with regards to channel shifting. Sometimes you get a tendency to say, hey, somebody says something negative about us on Twitter, let's answer back with a direct message, or let's answer back with a private message on Facebook. Let's kind of sweep this under the rug. And that kind of robs you of the opportunity to deliver great service in public, turn it into a spectator sport, and have everybody see how good you are. So I understand the temptation to say, hey, let's take bad news and make it private. But when you do that, if you're good at answering, then you don't get any credit for that. So we believe you should keep everything public unless you absolutely have to take it private to get an account number or something along those lines.
Gotcha. And R?
R is reply only twice, which I nodded to earlier, and that's the idea of, if somebody says, we hate you, you answer back, we're terribly sorry, how can we help? And they answer back, I don't need your help, I just hate you. And you answer back, well, we must have really done something this time. We'd sure like to talk to you about it to figure this out. Could you give us a call or a direct message or email us here? And they come back a third time and say, well, I don't want to email you, I just hate you. At that point, you just walk away because that person has demonstrated that they don't actually want help. You've given them 2 legitimate chances. You've given them multiple contact opportunities. They don't want to help. They just want to complain, and nothing you do at this point is going to change their mind. And so just walk away. Just move on to the next one. And so this idea of kind of getting into this lengthy tit for tat with customers on Twitter or Facebook or something like that, Yelp, it just doesn't benefit anybody. So answer twice and then keep on moving.
Gotcha. And the last one?
The last one is switch channels. So that's circumstances where you do actually go from Facebook, for example, to phone, from Facebook to email, from Facebook to somewhere else, but only once you've done that initial interaction on that channel. We talked about not channel shifting initially. So it's okay to say, all right, we have answered you, but to solve this, we have to go somewhere else. That's okay as long as you interact with them the first time in the channel that they pick. Because we got to remember, customers have a lot of contact options now. They could call you, they could email you, they could fax you, I guess. They could send you a letter. They could come see you at your place of business. They could do a lot of things, but they chose Facebook, and that wasn't random. They didn't spin a roulette wheel of contact mechanisms and land on F. Right? They picked Facebook because for whatever reason they feel like that's their best shot at getting their shit handled. So you got to respect that, right? They picked it because that's what they want. And too many businesses, I find, are too quick to say, well, I know you picked Facebook, but we as a business prefer to handle you via email, so why don't you email us instead? And that's very disrespectful of the customer's choice and their time and just kind of their preference, right? So what we tell clients all the time is we have to get to the point where we are answering customers in the channels that they prefer instead of only answering customers in the channels that the business prefers.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Now, you've alluded to speed, I mean, a couple times, and even, you mentioned that your original book name was going to be about speed. But can you define exactly, like, how quickly you should reply to on-stage haters? Should it be instant?
Well, I wouldn't say instant, because when you reply instantly in the true sense of that word, you run the risk of replying without empathy. So fast but not instant is the right way to go. The research that we conducted for Hug Your Haters found that approximately half, a little less than half, of people who complain in social media expect a reply within 1 hour. So what we always tell people is, look, if you can set it up so that you can answer your customers inside of an hour in social media, you're in great shape.
Okay. And that, you know, I think that you probably, you know, there's a bit of a sigh of relief there for a lot of people. You know, doing that will put you on the map of great customer service. So it doesn't have to be boom, boom, boom every second, every time, because that does, just the sound of it, even if I had all the resources in the world, seems a little bit daunting. But, you know, if you can get it, you know, within an hour, you know, if you want to go for 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes, go for it. But within an hour, that will suffice based on everything that Jay has seen out there. And I can attest, in his book, there's tons of research. So, you know, these aren't anecdotal type of...
It does, you know, it does depend a little bit on the industry, of course, because you have to look at it this way. How much will an hour delay negatively impact the customer? Right? So in some industries, like, it's fine. If you're in banking or automotive or retail or restaurants or a lot of other industries, an hour's fine, like whatever. But if you're in cable television, right? So, you know, if you're in cable television and somebody's internet goes out or their TV goes out, an hour, people are losing it, right, after an hour. They're freaking out, right?
Yeah.
So it can't,
That's a good point.
It's got to be faster than that, right? So airlines, same way. If your flight's canceled and you're like, Delta, help me, I'm stranded in Des Moines, like an hour is not going to get it done, right? So they're going to get back to you in like 5 minutes, right? Because you just have to. And so some of it's just what's the time horizon in your business. But most companies, and I mean the overwhelming majority of companies, if you can do it inside an hour consistently, you're in great shape.
Gotcha. All right, running a little bit short on time, and I have a lot of questions I want to get your answers to. So I'm going to try to maybe do like a fire
lightning
drill
round?
Here. Yeah, lightning round.
I'm excited. Okay.
Here we go.
4-word answers. Here we go.
All right. What is your advice for censoring people, like removing their comment or even hiding it on Facebook from everyone except for the person who left it? Should this ever be done, even for like crazies?
I would not delete anybody's comment without letting them know. But the hiding it from everybody else, Facebook has a way that you can hide it so that nobody sees it but them. Yeah, I'm okay with that in certain situations.
Okay, gotcha. Back channel support, like a customer service Twitter account. What are your thoughts there?
You know, it's a really interesting question. A lot of companies do have that, right? It's at company name help or at company name service, and so customer service has its own Twitter. I believe that if you're really, really good at customer service, why would you want to hide it? Like if you're great at this and you've invested time to be great at it, why would you want it to have its own account? Why wouldn't you want your main account to have customer service in there so that more people can see you being great at it? Now, if you're not very good at customer service, then absolutely you should have a separate account. But if you're really good at it, I would combine them. Yeah,
cool. Yeah, and to circle back to your original point, you lose that 40% of advocacy opportunity.
That's right.
All right, pinning a tweet when your service is off. Good, bad idea, and things to consider if you do decide to do that.
So pin your tweet to the top of your account when you're actually having an outage or some sort of known issue?
Or if you're just off, if your customer service ends at a certain time.
If you're done at night. Yeah, absolutely should. Absolutely. Especially if you have some other service opportunity that is open, right? So let's say for whatever reason your social care stops at 5 p.m. but email goes to 9. I would absolutely pin a tweet every night that says, hey, we stop at 5, but phone's open until 9. Here's how you get a hold of them.
Gotcha. All right, should you expect an increase or decrease in call volume by handling complaints socially?
Well, the thesis would be that you get fewer calls, right? That as you do more stuff in social, you get fewer calls because people will use social instead of calling. Today, what we're seeing in a lot of cases is the same amount of calls and more social, which is troubling because it causes some financial issues. That's what we're seeing today. Where that ends up in another year or two, I don't know.
Gotcha. But it's something to consider if you're, big company looking to get into this. Don't just automatically assume that you're going to be able to have less people on the phones. It may not be the case. All right. Handling trolls, this can be tricky. What's your advice for a company for dealing with those people?
First thing is you never know somebody's a troll. You don't know somebody's a troll till their second reply.
Gotcha.
Right, and a lot of times people will say, somebody just leaves one particularly nasty comment and they get labeled a troll. And it's like, look, you don't know that that person is a troll until you try to help them and then they demonstrate that they don't want help. Just because somebody's nasty doesn't mean that they are out of bounds. It just means that they're nasty. Like, there's lots of people out there who are nasty, especially if they're having a bad day or having a problem. So I think the challenge is saying, well, anything negative means they're a troll, therefore we're not going to answer them. My advice is you answer everybody. When I say every customer, I don't mean every customer except for angry customers. I don't mean every customer except for mean customers. I mean every customer. And then if on the second reply they're clearly a troll, well, then you keep on walking. But you don't know that until the second reply.
So your advice is follow your original advice. Go with the fears. All right, awesome. What about consistency with messaging? Do you just give employees basic parameters and let them communicate as they see fit, in other words, like naturally? Or do you feel it should be more structured with consistent messaging and verbiage?
In between is the answer. Will you have some sample responses to common questions so that reps can get a feel for what would be a way that you might be able to say it. And so you want to have some guidelines there, but obviously allow them to put their own humanity in there so that it sounds authentic. The nice thing is a lot of the software now, Spreadfast, Sprout Social, Clarabridge, which is one of our partners, Conversocial, a lot of the good software out there has the ability for you to create sample responses for common questions and store it in the software, so that your reps on Twitter and Facebook, et cetera, can pull that in and then modify it so it sounds like their own voice.
Perfect. That was a wonderful answer. Awesome. Thanks for that advice. Yeah. What about self-service customer service? A lot of times people, might be listening to this and think, well, my FAQs or my frequently asked questions are worthless. What are your thoughts there, or do you have any other creative ideas?
The cheapest phone call is the one that was never placed. So the research, I didn't do this research, but it's cited in the book, says that either 70 or 72% of consumers say that they would prefer to find an answer on a website instead of call. So what that means is that self-serve information, right? Self-service is not a dereliction of duty. You're actually doing your customers a favor. So I've got tons and tons and tons of clients who have FAQs, and none of them are even close to being good enough, right? They're not nearly comprehensive enough. They're not big enough. They're not current enough. You're answering literally the frequently asked questions. Maybe you should answer all questions, right? And try to develop a real repository of help docs and things that people can find easily so they can get more and more of their questions answered themselves online.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right, couple last questions. One, community-based service. Can you speak about what this is and who that might be a good fit for?
Yeah, same thing, right? Almost with self-service, the huge trend and really important, this idea of, hey, maybe we could get our customers to solve problems that our other customers have. Customers love that. The psychology of that is really powerful. So simplest form would be you create a Facebook group for your customers and you ask some of your best customers, the ones who really know the product, to spend some time in there, and you give them some sort of gift certificate or special T-shirt or recognition as a community support leader. And what you do is you say, all right, we want to try and have 80% of our common questions answered by customers, and then the hard 10, 20% the company answers, brings your customer service costs way down, and customers actually love it in many cases.
Okay, awesome.
Because, and the reason that is they trust each other, right?
Yeah.
And they trust each other more than they trust the company. It doesn't matter what company it is.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody needs any to be sold on that statement. Referrals, recommendations from friends are much more powerful than any sort of marketing message you could ever put out there. Okay, what about measurement? How can a company measure their efforts here once they've put all this awesome advice that you're giving to action?
Well, classically, what people are going to look at is number of calls, number of tweets, number of people served. You're going to look at average call volume. You're going to look at things like that, and it's all fine. But ultimately, what you want to look at is how much did people appreciate the support that they got by channel, and does it exceed their expectations? And so classically, a Net Promoter Score type question on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you love your service today? And you ask that question of people who were helped via Twitter, via Facebook, via Yelp, via phone, whatever, to see where they appreciate it better is great. The other thing that we work on a lot is called effort score. So you ask a cross-section of customers, how hard or easy was it for you to get an answer to your question today? Because ultimately what you're trying to do is take friction out of the equation. If you can make it easy for them, they will love you more. So looking at effort as a metric is something that I think has a lot of merit moving forward.
Okay, very cool. And I know I said that was the last question, but actually one other. What's a couple of the most common mistakes people make with social customer service that they should avoid?
I think part of it is one of the mistakes is picking and choosing, right? Is saying, hey, we're going to do social customer service, but we're only going to answer certain customers at certain times in certain circumstances. You're kind of cherry picking your involvement, and I don't think that's very useful. And the other thing is companies get involved in social customer service, but then don't tell their customers that that's true, right? They don't use marketing to say, hey, you used to only be able to call us, and now we're here to help you on Twitter and Facebook. Like, somebody should be told that. And so they have this program, but no one knows, right? It's not merchandised anywhere.
That's a great point.
And so then they're like, well, how come no one's using Twitter? It's like, well, man, because no one knew they could do that.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's same, it's very similar to, R&D creates this amazing feature, and then the marketing never talks about it, right?
Because customers, how often does customer really need support? Every once in a while, probably. So they're not spending time like, hey, it'd be interesting. I wonder if these guys do Twitter customer service now. Like, they don't care that much, right? So you got to tell them what's possible. And a lot of times, what I find is somewhat ironic is that there's not enough marketing for customer service.
Yeah, that is ironic. That's a great point, though. It's a great point. Well, Jay, that's awesome stuff. Do you have any parting thoughts before we have to let you go?
I hope everybody does it. I can guarantee if you do it right and do it well, you're going to make money, save money, both of those things, which is good.
Awesome. And how can people continue to learn from you, either in this or in general?
Yeah, the book is hugyourhaters.com. We have a whole online course about these topics as well called keepyourcustomerscourse.com. You can find me at jaybaer.com.
And that's Jaybaybear at Jay Baer. All right, awesome, Jay. Really appreciate your time, your insight, and your awesome advice. I know you're going to help a few people out there, and I really appreciate it. Until next time.
My pleasure.